Hot button.
Yeah, I got a whole tray of mac and cheese in my fridge.
Nice.
So now, like, you can't hide it because it's so big, and now other people in the house can eat. So,
Yeah, well, that's what you get for teaching your dog to use the refrigerator.
all right, everybody. Today is going to be a real treat, an adventure. So get ready because Austin is going to give us all the next big chapter in Microsoft's video game saga as they attempt to follow up the original Xbox with their succeeding project, the Xbox 360.
420.
Yeah. A device, if you will, that was later to be reflected on as probably being the most important home console ever released since Nintendo's NES in 1985. And all of this while simultaneously hosting what many would also call the most important gaming service ever created. Now, I could spoil what lies ahead in this full rundown, but I think I'm just going to let the research here speak for itself. This is Hot Button.
Yeah.
I am Randall
Yeah.
Beatrice, here with Chris Anatuano.
Yes, I've been
And-
informed I can no longer use "It's a Me." Apparently, there's a
That cease and
famous
desist
character
was
from
very-
a company I've never heard of,
Disney.
Nintendo, and they told me to stop.
We are here together with host and Xbox expert, Austin Blakesley.
It's a me.
Yeah, send that cease and desist. We got at least a couple more episodes.
Austin, why don't you take us down memory lane and continue Microsoft's journey into the video game world?
All right, so for those of you listening, we did an episode on the original Xbox. Not sure when this is going to come out in relation to that, but if you haven't heard it, go back and listen because this is a direct continuation.
Yeah, pause this right now. Just take a minute.
Yeah, we'll wait.
July of 2025.
So yeah, when we last left, Microsoft had just released the Xbox
Whoa, slow down.
to a mild success, and they were working on a service, an online service, which would later come to be known as Xbox Live. But when the
It's a good
Xbox
name.
launched, Xbox Live wasn't its name. I think it was like Xbox Online or something.
Not
It's
as
dumb.
it's a miracle they even.
Xbox, let's play together.
So
Those commercials back then were pretty good though.
when Microsoft was dreaming this up, pun not intended because I'm about to mention the Dreamcast. When the Sega Dreamcast came out around 1999 while the Xbox was being worked on, the console had an online plan. They had built in a dial-up port.
Yeah, what a feature.
As we'll come to know, that didn't work out too well. Although I don't know
Hey,
if the
Alien
online,
Front Online was pretty cool.
I don't know if the online was the reason the Dreamcast died. I doubt it.
If
There
you
were a
wanted
lot
to
of
get-
reasons.
If you wanted to get stomped in Quake 3, it had crossplay with PC
Oh,
on
hell
the
yeah.
Dreamcast. So you could play that on one joystick on dial-up against people on the mouse and keyboard on PC.
What a joy.
Yeah, it was a good
So,
time.
Microsoft saw this and decided Sega had the right idea but the wrong execution. As I mentioned in the Xbox episode, Microsoft had taken a big hit and a lot of flack for including an Ethernet port and a hard drive in the original Xbox.
Gotta burn those CDs to your console somehow.
Yeah. The hard drive was included in there originally because developers thought it would be a good idea to allow games to run faster, although the original Xbox didn't do a lot of installing of anything.
Yeah.
The hard drive was actually included in there to allow for DLC.
Oh.
Which remember before, like they had the map pack in Halo 2,
Yep.
but it was like a separate.
It was
yeah.
a disc that
Yeah.
you had to put in and download to the hard drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a time.
And they also included the Ethernet port. Now, looking back, the Ethernet port seems like a no-brainer.
An obvious, yeah.
Yeah.
But like when the Xbox was being developed back in 2000,
Yeah.
broadband internet was not a thing that a lot of people had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody thought their computers were about to kill them. So why would they want...
Y2K.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had broadband back then. This was my mom's business.
Yeah, a few people had broadband, but not a lot of people had broadband. But
Yeah.
Microsoft included it anyway. They didn't think that the dial-up would allow them to make the service that they wanted to make, so they gambled because
Yeah.
they hoped that by the time Xbox had hit its stride, that broadband would be more widely adopted, which we now know was true.
Yeah.
But a lot of people gave them a lot of flack. But broadband was necessary for a few things, a lot of security features that they wanted. You know, PC games were online for way longer than
Yeah. That's
even
kinda-
before the Xbox was thought up. But they had a lot of cheating issues. and-
Yeah, that's the
yeah.
advantage of being a console attached to a gigantic tech company. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
That's
like
true.
having a little bit of foresight to be like, yeah, we think this is gonna pan out.
They
so-
wanted smoother online gaming. They wanted certain features
God
like
bless the voice chat.
DLC, which would not have been very possible on,
No.
on a dial-up connection, and voice chat, which
Yeah.
was also not possible on dial-up. As we know, because anybody that lived through that time knows you can't play online games and talk on the phone at the same time on a dial-up
Oh my
connection.
god, I did that.
So-
I think the phone bills were.
God, without if they would have stuck with dial-up, you know, nobody could have called my mom a whore, and then I would have never had to pay $80 for a $20 video game.
Yeah.
I mean, the PS2 and the GameCube kind of had not to the degree, but they tried a little bit. Not to
They
the-
retroactively
They did,
added
yeah,
it,
that was
which I will
after
get
that.
to later.
Yeah.
But yeah, they tried, but Microsoft had the foresight
Oh yeah,
to
They
include it
planned
from the
ahead
beginning.
for it.
Yes. Microsoft had smartly decided that online play was the future. And they even
Oh, were
went,
they wrong?
they even went as far as to say that Xbox Live would be a pillar of the Xbox brand, which
Yep, still,
it
yeah.
definitely is. Allowing an entirely new stream of revenue that their competitors were missing out on. DLC,
very smart.
subscriptions.
Yeah, this is even before all the app stuff and other incentives
Yeah.
and everything. Yeah,
But, you
Free
know,
games.
despite this was a new technology. Nobody had really been doing anything like this, so it wasn't ready for launch. And there's an interesting anecdote to this because a lot of people here probably remember playing, and a lot of our listeners probably remember playing Halo 2 online.
yeah.
But nobody remembers playing Halo 1 online because it didn't have
Didn't
online.
have it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I looked this up, and apparently there were like really early versions of Unreal Championship and an NFL game, some other stuff that they were using like to test this out for a little while.
Yeah.
There was an unreleased thing called like Revolt. But I was trying to remember what the first official game was that used Xbox Live.
It was Mech Warrior.
It was Mech Warrior. Okay,
Yeah.
because I remember playing Crimson Skies, which I think was before Halo 2.
Crimson Skies I think, might have also been the first, but the first one I remember is definitely Mech Warrior.
Okay. Apparently, the first boxes that came out with the live enabled gold banner on it were. Oh wow! I think it was Mecha. No, it was Brute Force and Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell. So that was 2002. This is damn early.
Yeah.
Though other games, I think Mech Warrior had it before it, but it just wasn't.
Was it Mech Warrior or Mech Assault?
It might have been Mech Assault.
This goes back to the Epic thing where they can't figure out how to name their fucking games.
I just thought this was it. That was
But
interesting.
an interesting anecdote, which if we ever get to do a Halo episode, I'll go a lot more into this. But Halo 1 had planned online play.
Is that where the LAN stuff came from?
Right,
Yeah.
but they had to scrap it at the last minute because Xbox Live wouldn't be ready, so they transformed it into the LAN feature, which actually really helped Halo.
Yeah,
a lot.
arguably. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Fucking awesome. That was 16 players too, wasn't it? Like I think.
Yeah,
Did
it's
you- yeah.
4 Xboxes LAN.
That's great.
But yeah, Microsoft was kind of laughed at the time for relying on broadband. A lot of people were very skeptical that broadband would get widely adopted over dial-up because of its expensiveness, but you know.
Yeah.
Who was laughing at? I guess Microsoft wasn't as big. in the
No,
early
I mean they
2000s.
they were. It was just that, you know, if you're relying on selling a console at a loss and charging people for a subscription,
Right.
you need to have a lot of people pay for that subscription. And when not a lot of people have broadband, you're shortening your audience a lot. You're thinning it
Yeah.
out. But
yeah.
again, as hindsight tells us, it was a good move, and all those people who laughed were
They're
not
probably
we're
dead
not the
now.
last ones left.
Bill Gates fucking buried them.
I mean,
in
you
his
said that
yard.
Sony and Nintendo showed little interest at this
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
So-
Fantasy Star. That went on. I mean, who cares?
Nintendo never put online in the GameCube. They had a broadband adapter for LAN, and it
did.
kind of went nowhere.
Mario Kart Double Dash, brah. That land and that bad Kirby racing game
Yeah.
or whatever.
But Sony eventually came out with an adapter, but they let people choose dial-up or
Final Fantasy.
broadband, which made their games perform a lot worse.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I mean, we played SOCOM a little bit back in the day.
and this was a lot of foresight because the thing Microsoft had in their pocket was that everybody else was going after building game consoles, and Microsoft was building game consoles, but they were not a hardware manufacturer.
Right.
Their strength lied in services and software.
Yeah.
And so they were going to try to combine those two things and make a service that people would pay for where they could play their software online. And this was their bread and butter. This was something that Sony or Nintendo could never in a million years beat Microsoft at.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny is like,
They have the
even the way that
Or
you played...
about a decade, because Sony beat them recently.
Even in the way that you played, like, PS2 games online wasn't even as streamlined at all.
No, it was
You
an
had to, like,
afterthought.
build a server
It
for,
was
like,
an
Tony Hawk.
afterthought.
It was,
Yeah.
For sure,
I
it was an
remember-
afterthought up until, I think, recently, to be honest.
I mean,
Oh,
I
yeah.
played a bit of Resident Evil, like, Outbreak back in the day. But the funny thing is, that probably would have been a hell of a lot better on Xbox. But...
Yeah.
Well, the thing we'll come to learn a little later, but Xbox Live did really well, but Xbox Live didn't do gangbusters until Halo 2 launched.
Yeah.
And Halo 2 launched
That's where I made my game.
in 2004, which at that point, the codename Revolution
Was already-
and codename Xenon, and I forget the codename. I think there's no codenames for Sony consoles because it's going to be the
there was.
PlayStation with another number. But like all of
they
those,
had one for the Pro, I think, and it was...
Yeah.
It was Morpheus?
Morpheus.
Yeah.
So yeah, Xbox Live was a big part of their thing, but in order to sell a service, you have to sell people on the hardware first.
Yeah.
You can't sell people Xbox Live without selling them the Xbox. So we're going to rewind a little bit back to the beginning, back to right after Xbox launched. Microsoft had done what a lot of people thought was unthinkable. They released a console, and they did it in a very short time frame.
Yeah.
Like the PS2 was being worked on right after the PS1 launched.
Yeah.
Same with the GameCube right after the N64 launched. Xbox started planning right when the PS2 was about to come out.
Yeah.
They made the original Xbox in around 20 months.
Yeah.
And that includes manufacturing it.
And you went over that pretty, like,
Yeah.
in depth. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, I
definitely
did.
go back and check out that episode.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
wait.
It's
We'll pause
super- it's
again.
really interesting.
Here's your
Yeah,
second
we'll wait.
chance to pause.
and a lot of people were skeptical about the original Xbox, but it did okay. You know, if you go back to our last episode, we have a lot of analogies to Pearl Harbor and things like that. Bill Gates wanted to crush the Japanese companies, and he didn't do a great job yet. We'll get there, but this console did pretty well. Microsoft, by the time 2005 rolled around, which was the start of the next generation, which we'll get to later, Microsoft had managed to sell about 21 million Xboxes. To put that in perspective, they beat out Nintendo's GameCube by about 1 million units. GameCube
Hey,
was at
whoa,
20
whoa.
million.
Technically,
suck it.
technically, Nintendo still won here because the Wii is essentially also a GameCube, just with a bad controller.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you're right. Nintendo's totally winning. That held. How many Wii U's did they sell? Like 2?
yeah, us too.
Hey, I had one too.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I played Breath of the Wild on it.
You did, yeah.
Uh-huh. The whole game.
Did they flip if whether Link was right or left-handed or whatever?
So they did pretty well. They managed to eke out in front of the GameCube. However, Sony, big dick swinging,
Yeah.
came in and said, "Fuck both of you," and they sold a whopping 90 million.
I saw that number. I was just like, holy
and this
shit.
is when the 360 launched. This is when the next generation
Right,
started.
yeah, they were
PS2's
already-
up to like 150 million now because they were still
Jesus
selling
Christ.
PS2s far into the
Yeah,
PS3's
that little tiny
lifetime.
one that's like as big as a piece of paper.
That thing was awesome.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
thing
still
was the
have one of
shit.
those.
But-
Yeah, it's like this did.
crazy.
Sony had managed to more than double both of their competitors combined here.
God.
So
Yeah.
there
PlayStation
was
2 was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Microsoft was gaining some ground,
good
but they were
platform.
they were getting stomped.
They could have had 2 more controller ports,
But-
though. Just saying.
They narrowed all of their mistakes into basically one failure, which was that they didn't put enough time into the Xbox, and also they came out too late.
Being first to market apparently is
Yes.
is a big.
The original Xbox came
Big
out
get.
a full year. Came out a full year after the PlayStation, and they didn't sell that many more than them at the time.
Right. Yeah.
But they did match the GameCube. GameCube came out right around the same time as the Xbox, and they beat
It was like
them.
a month or something.
So they're like, we got to be first to market.
Yeah.
They need to beat Sony to market, which meant, again, they would have to make a console in a shorter time frame. Now, keep in mind, at the point when the Xbox launched, Sony was a year or more into development on the PS3 when the
Right.
PS2 launched. When the Xbox
And
launched,
it was only getting bigger every day.
yeah. But this was a little too much for some because they basically didn't really get to celebrate launching the Xbox. They had to go right back to work. And two of the guys that I mentioned in the first part of this saga, Kevin Bacchus and Seamus Blackley, decided to leave, and they left the team a couple months after the console came out. Bill Gates had officially stepped down as CEO. I guess he was bitter about losing the war to the Japanese. So he stepped down as CEO. He became chairman of the board of Microsoft, and Steve Ballmer taken over as the new CEO of Microsoft. But the interesting thing is that despite the failures of the original Xbox, both of them are still very on board with being a part of the games industry.
Yeah.
And they were ramping up. Many other less known employees stayed. Microsoft's game division started out at about 400 people pre-Xbox. They were now up to 2,000. They were up fivefold.
Yeah, that's nuts.
And it would only get bigger from there. The biggest issue, more than time, was money. Microsoft's quote-unquote entertainment division was losing money at an alarming rate.
Jesus.
And I guess this included their PC stuff at this point as well.
It did, but it was, I think, it was something like their entertainment division lost $4 billion.
Holy shit.
In the time the Xbox came out. And
That's a bummer.
3.7 billion of that was the Xbox. And then the rest of it was
Shit.
PC
It's believable
stuff.
that
What do you mean? Our kids are not having fun out there?
It's believable that could have been it. Like, imagine if they were one and done with that, if they didn't keep going, and they're just well...
Each Xbox
This didn't work
was
out.
being made at a loss of about $168. A little backstory on console making. You're supposed to make your console. You're supposed to make everything yourself. This is what Sony does because they're a hardware company.
Right.
And Nintendo also does it. You design the chips so that they can shrink over time. You pay less and less for them, and then people buy more and more. You cut the price, and eventually over time, you're making money on the console. Microsoft heard about this strategy, but didn't exactly implement it all that well. They use a lot of off-the-shelf parts, which do not lower in price over time because they don't have control over that.
Right.
Other companies do. So this $168 loss on every console was there. It shrank, and I don't have an exact number of how much it cost them to make the thing when it was dead and buried when the 360 came out, but that's why the Xbox they just cut that shit off.
Yeah, they were.
Like I said, the PS2 was being sold far into the PS3's lifetime. Once the 360 came out, Microsoft was like, fucking, we're done making Xboxes.
Right.
Like, we're not going to sell these
it's
things now.
You want to make that money back with games, and they'd even...
Yeah. And so the other part of the strategy is that you sell games to cover your losses.
Yeah.
But the problem was that was a strategy back in the 2D days. In the 3D days of game development, it required a lot more people.
You need a lot more third parties.
I bet the average cost of a game from the last generation to this one is probably skyrocketed the most.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, not this one currently. I meant from the...
Oh, yeah, from Xbox to 360.
We'll get there a little
Yeah,
bit. There's an interesting anecdote
recoup all that cost
when
back.
Microsoft invests in a certain company that they stole from Nintendo. We'll get to later. This was a big deal. But budgets in the N64 PS1 days were probably around $1 to $2 million. They were getting to $20 to $30 million. Now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now they're like 200 to 300 million. But this was getting a lot harder to rely on games to make all your money. If a
lot of publishers didn't make it.
Yeah, if a game wasn't a hit
from that era.
If every game you released wasn't a hit, it's not like the movie industry where you just recover it on your next blockbuster. Like, it took a lot out of companies, and some publishers, like we said, didn't make it, especially now in these days when budgets are inflated to
now
no
all it
end.
takes is one bad game and your company's done.
Yep.
But it's like I said, Microsoft had lost about $4 billion in the lifespan of the original Xbox.
I mean, they still probably did better than the Vita or the Wii U, most likely. I don't know.
Yeah, well, yeah. But here's the interesting thing. A lot of people were shocked when they announced they were working on a
360, yeah.
Because any other company, Nintendo and Sony included, if they lost $4 billion, they'd be like, fuck this, we are out.
Yeah.
But it's interesting numbers here. They lost $4 billion over 4 years, from 2001 to 2005 with the Xbox. They were
billion a year.
They were also making $2 billion a quarter, or $8 billion a year off of Windows and Office. So those losses were half a year of profits.
Take it.
Yes. So they could definitely take it.
Well, now Office costs money, so fuck them.
Office always costs money. You just can't steal it as easily now.
I just incriminated myself on here.
Yeah.
That's Randall Beatrice. Addresses.
P.O. Box.
But yeah, they knew they could deal with the losses for now. Microsoft was all about investment. everybody said the Xbox is a failure. The Xbox is a failure. If you interview anybody who was involved in the Xbox's development, they will not tell you that this was a failure. They'll tell you that it was an investment. And that investment paid off.
I wouldn't even go as far as call it a failure even at the time. But
it did mildly well. But for a lot of other companies, losing $4 billion over 4 years is a huge failure. For Microsoft, that's an investment. Because
what did we learn?
They wanted to grow this. They said if they could just deal with the losses, they'd get to the part where this was bringing in $1 billion a year. And then they'd be bringing in $9 billion a year as a company. And then those losses would be like a memory that everybody forgot.
You're right, yeah.
Which, kind of where we are now. But they also had kind of a great thing going with Xbox Live, which I'll get to the launch of that as we go through the timeline.
Yeah.
But there weren't a ton of people playing Xbox Live, like I said, till Halo 4 came out. But these people were still paying $50 a year.
Right.
Too.
So that that
was the thing. I was trying to find out by this point how many subscribers there were. I don't know if I mean, Halo 2 sold about 6.5 million copies, so I figured there are at least that many people playing.
Yeah.
At least that many people subscribed.
I can tell you this: the record before Halo's launch day, the record was 40,000 concurrent users.
Wow.
On Xbox Live, which is really low for an online service.
Yeah.
When Halo 2 launched, I think the launch day numbers were something like 300,000 concurrent users. So. Halo 2 kind of catapulted Xbox Live into... But they still had those 40,000 people... Well, it's just concurrent users. That's not all their subscribers.
Yeah,
we're still paying $50 a year. So that not only helped them cover some of the loss, but also they proved themselves.
Yeah.
Like, Xbox Live was a proven good service. And... A lot of Microsoft's pitches before the Xbox came out was like, "Hey, we're gonna revolutionize online play." And everyone's like, "All right, dude, we'll see it when it happens." And then guess what?
Yeah.
Fucking happened.
Yeah, they just didn't have the content yet.
Yeah.
An interesting quote I got from a VentureBeat article that I used for a lot of sources was Ed Fries or Fries. I don't know how to say it, but he was the head of Microsoft's game division. He was the head of all the game development. He's quoted as saying Now, this article was written in 2013, right when the Xbox One was coming out.
Okay.
The Xbox brand alone, not counting the actual business of selling consoles, just the brand name, the name Xbox, is worth about $4 billion today.
Very nice.
Woo!
Yeah.
So they definitely earned that money back and then some.
If we can get 4 billion people to send us $1, we can buy Xbox.
Yeah.
Go to our Patreon.
Hot Buns buy an Xbox.
Yeah, and then when you start your Xbox up, it'll just play our episodes. You're not even allowed to play games anymore.
We'll play Red Dead. Hey, here's an episode about Red Dead instead.
You ever think about how cowboys are kind of like...
But Microsoft's philosophy of developers first, of working with developers and making development easier, had worked in two very distinct ways. The Japanese had led the games industry for a very long time, and with the birth of the Xbox, American companies were starting to gain a lot of prominence. This is where people like Activision and EA really gained a lot of prominence.
Yeah.
They were not
Good
huge.
for them.
They're huge today.
they're like pillars, and
they've been around since the 2D days, but they weren't huge companies until this generation.
Yeah.
It also put Sony and Nintendo in their place a little, because after working with Xbox, a lot of developers were like, yeah, well, what are you guys going to do to make it easier on us? Like, there was no longer the days of like, hey, buddy, you're going to deal with how shitty our tools are and you're going to like it, because Microsoft made some tools that were easy to use, and everybody was just like...
Well, that's what you were saying in the Xbox one when they were at conventions, and that was their whole like philosophy, was like bringing people on board and just being like, hey, like...
We're going to make this easy on you. And now Nintendo and Sony had to deal with that.
Yeah, and it paid off.
And they came up with different ways of innovating to try to combat this. We know Nintendo's innovation was, hey, waggle this remote at your TV. But
hey, I was stick.
Sony's innovation...
What if you could control a game, but poorly?
Sony's innovation was something that they actually announced before the Xbox came out.
It was also a stick with a ball in the
No.
end.
That was not the innovation I'm talking about.
The 6-axis.
They announced that they were creating something called the Cell processor. And this was announced
Yeah.
after the PS2 came out, before the Xbox came out.
What if making games was too easy?
This was a joint effort between Sony, Toshiba, and IBM.
pain
This
in
would
the
be in a
ass.
new incredible chip that would be able to be used in both IBM servers as well as the PlayStation 3.
That E3 2006 is so fucking good because they just keep talking up this thing like it is the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember this.
Yeah. And at the announcement, Microsoft was shaking in their boots a little bit. One Microsoft staffer was quoted as saying, "Oh my God, it scared the shit out of me." Because
Fucking nerd.
them being programmers, they're like, "Oh man, they're making a chip that can run servers and their console. They're going to blow us out of the water." But here's the interesting thing. Microsoft
We
had
didn't think about folding it home.
Microsoft had one thing to hold on to here. This chip was new. This was nothing like anyone had ever built before.
Yeah.
And as such, it would be incredibly hard to program for
Yeah,
and
sorry, I spoiled
incredibly
that.
expensive. The two things that should never be in a game console.
Yeah.
And Microsoft, with their developer first design philosophy, said, all right, that's their weakness. This thing's going to be impossible to make games for. So all we have to do is make our next Xbox easy to make games for, and we'll fucking win.
Yeah.
And as we know now, with hindsight, that kind of worked out. But Microsoft got to work on planning its own chip.
One that isn't stupid.
Yeah. We'll get to that.
I mean, kudos to Sony, I guess, for making their games nearly impossible to port and emulate. So,
Yeah.
future proofing, I guess.
yeah. But I mentioned in the last episode our friends at Web TV.
Right, yeah.
They were a company that made set-top boxes that you could use shitty Windows PCs.
They got fleeced, right, kind of? Or
Yeah.
screwed over, I should say.
Well, they had some tough times. A lot of their projects got abandoned. It was the early 2000s now. Nobody wanted a Windows 98 computer on their TV anymore. We were getting away
It was the
from that.
2000s. You don't want anything that said 98.
Yeah.
No, that was the
So-
dark times.
So their projects were abandoned. Web TV was kind of folded. But a lot of the people who worked on that, after kind of being shunned from the Xbox team in the Xbox One's development, original Xbox.
I know. This,
Fuck
it's
you,
the-
Microsoft. But in the original Xbox's development, a lot of these people got shunned away because they came up with a pitch and Microsoft rejected them. They were a little bitter, but at
Yeah.
the same time, the cost of doing business, a lot of them were then folded into the Xbox team, and they were given the seemingly impossible task of working on a chip that could both compete with this new cell processor, this mecca of computer processing.
The power of the cell,
Yeah.
if you will, TM. That was how they phrased it.
But it also had to be designed to not cost too much, and it had to be designed so that it could be reduced in price greatly over time. So a couple of those guys got together and they codenamed this project Project Trinity. Yes, after the Matrix character.
not
Did
nearly
you really say that too?
Bunch
probably?
of fucking nerds.
not nearly as cool as the Durango or the Scorpio.
No.
But then what is it? I mentioned earlier that the PlayStation one was called Morpheus, so I was still banging the Matrix drum.
Yep.
into the-
Exactly.
And we'll
Whatever,
learn
movie.
that they love their code names at Microsoft because Xbox 360 as a whole had like 4 different parts that had code names. There's like 8 code names for the 360.
There are,
It's
yeah.
nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, in 2002, like a month after this thing launched, they were hard at getting the Xbox Live launch right. So a lot of their resources were developed to getting Xbox Live to launch. But they decided to begin full force on a new project for everybody that they could spare. And this project would be called Xbox Next.
Next. I think they used that again later as well.
Yeah,
like
they
that
do.
Phrasing.
Now,
Xbox.
I have a little note here. There is a VentureBeat article that I'm getting some information from, and it is called "The Making of the Xbox." It's also available as an ebook. They did a great
And
job.
a phone book, I guess, considering the amount.
Yeah, they did a great job summing a lot of this stuff up, but there are also like a lot of people involved in this, and I'm not going to go over names because I could sit here and read off a list of names for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It said that
That's
there
our
were
next
over
episode.
25,000 people who had a hand in making 360 by the time it came out.
Wait, 25,000? I read that as 2,500.
Nope, 25,000.
Yeah, not reading that.
No. That's a lot
Holy
of
shit.
That's a lot of
All
names.
right, let's start it.
I'm gonna cover.
Yeah, Aaron A. Aronson.
I'm gonna cover some really important people you might have heard of, like Bill Gates or Steve Ballmer.
Who?
but I'm not going to go into the names. If you're interested in who actually had a hand in this, that article has it. And they do like a little "Where Are They Now" thing at the end.
That's cute.
Which, yeah. But
dead in jail. No, wait, that's high. That's our high school graduating class.
Whoa, woof. But there was a lot of shakeup in staff. I said in the first episode that the Xbox project felt like a startup within Microsoft.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought of it as career suicide. A lot of people didn't want to join the team, and they were just doing whatever the fuck they wanted. Bill Gates was behind them 100%. But this time, this thing had to make money. And this thing had become less of a startup and more of a structured project like Microsoft was used to.
Yeah.
Which helped the thing shape up a lot better, but a lot of people like that scrappy nature of the original Xbox. And
Sure.
Yeah.
That's punk.
Yeah, we were doing it with sleeves rolled up.
Yeah. One interesting...
Just all the way up, so it's like up to the...
one interesting side note,
Roll
a
up your
name
pants, too.
you might have heard, Larry Herb joined the team as an Xbox Live programmer. And you might not know that name, but you'll better know him by his gamer tag, Major Nelson.
Major
he later
Nelson.
went on to be the most public-facing person on the Xbox team.
Still follow him to this day.
Yep, and he is the head of all social media for Xbox, which is interesting because Sony and Nintendo kind of have that, but it's like Reggie's like the president,
Totally.
and like it's always like presidents and executives, but he's like
But he handles the business.
the social.
As well.
He's like the social media guy,
Yeah.
which is interesting. And this was also around the time that Peter Moore, who's another famous, he's the guy that rolled up his sleeve and showed the Halo 3 launch date.
Okay, I do
Peter
remember
Moore,
that.
he was the president of Sega of America. And
Who had the GTA 4 tattoo?
That was him.
That was him as well?
Yeah.
Are those rub-on tattoos or like...
No, they weren't real tattoos.
Oh man, that's way less
Yeah,
cool.
you're talking about a group of guys who named their console after a Matrix character. Like getting tattoos.
He was the head of Sony,
Stupid. Who goes on stage at E3 and fucking...
he was the head of Sega of America, but obviously that wasn't as big a job anymore. So he joined the Xbox team.
What are Mario and Sonic gonna do now? What Olympic sport this time?
But Peter Moore's first meeting was with Steve Ballmer, the new CEO, and Steve Ballmer had a reputation for just yelling at people. And this will kind of
In a bad way.
no, he just like yelled a lot.
Yeah.
This will hammer home how much Xbox Live was
See that politician?
part of
that
their
did that?
pitch. Steve Ballmer's first meeting with Peter Moore, Steve Ballmer was just yelling Xbox Live over and over again and slamming his fist into the table. And the
What
meeting
is he, fucking Hitler?
the meeting ended when he accidentally slammed his fist into the phone and broke it in half.
How hard did he punch that phone?
I
Holy
know,
shit.
I take it back. What is he, a fucking gorilla? He's just sitting at his desk. Xbox Live, Xbox Live, Xbox Live. Yeah.
Jumping up and down.
Smashes the conference table. Excuse me, sir, your 3 o'clock banana is here?
Just a bunch of investors sitting like
So, Project Trinity was the CPU, the chip inside the Xbox,
Right,
not the
yeah.
Xbox's code name. So the project was renamed Project Xenon, which was the code name for the whole Xbox.
way cooler.
And their number one goal,
Isn't that the bad guy in Scientology?
that's Xenu.
That's also not the bad guy.
Yeah, he's God.
I thought he was the bad guy.
Is God the bad guy in Christianity? I mean, yeah, kinda. Okay. All right. Fair enough. But yeah. Their number one goal for Project Xenon was to keep their costs
Chris is
under
still losing
control.
it.
I know.
Is God the bad guy in Christianity? Yes. That's the best shit ever. Okay, sorry.
All right. They had to keep cost under control no matter what. Microsoft was not about to sell anything for a loss ever again because that was their one fuck up last time. If they had sold the Xbox at a profit, they would have made a lot of money selling 21 million of those things, but you know.
Yeah.
So the problem was that Sony had their own chip factories. They made hardware and software, and they were able to control their own production. Microsoft was relying on other companies to produce stuff for them. They didn't really make hardware. They designed hardware and had other people make it for them. Yeah. But Sony was able to exploit something called Moore's Law. So here's a little computer lesson for you. Do you guys know? You know what Moore's Law is because you can see my fucking script. Do you know? Do you know?
I have no idea.
I was going to give the description of Murphy's Law. And I'm glad.
No, I have no idea.
Okay. So there's
I didn't at all until
okay.
so yeah.
There's a guy.
I could have sounded real smart though if I just read your script right.
There's a guy from IBM in the 50s who came up with this. His last name's Moore, obviously. But it states that the number of complex components that you can fit on a state-of-the-art chip double every year, which is how technology keeps getting smaller and smaller over time.
Eventually it'll just...
And also cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah.
So it means that you could either, every year, you can make something that had a chip that would have double the amount of capacitors and things like that, or you can make the same chip half the size and for half the price. So a little example, I said Microsoft was selling the Xbox at a $168 loss, and that didn't really shrink over time.
Yeah.
Sony sold the original PlayStation for, what was it, $299 for the original PlayStation?
It's $299.
That thing cost $450 to make in 1994.
Oh, woof. And 94 money, too.
Yeah. And then they managed to shrink that down to $80 by the time the PlayStation 2 came out.
Oh, cool.
So
that's probably why they sold that little mini PS1
yes,
at
exactly.
that time. Yeah.
This allows your profits to go up, but also you can also shrink the price of the console, which every time you cut the cost of your console, you widen your market. Because there's people are like, I'm not paying $300 for a console. And you're like, it's $200 now. And they're like, yeah, I can
still
swing
going
it.
today.
Yeah.
We keep getting small iterations of each platform.
Yeah, it's so cheap. Now they just have chickens that you open up the eggs and little PlayStation 2s inside.
Yo, do you remember the Game Boy Micro? that thing could have fit in a chicken egg. It's ridiculous.
But Microsoft knew they had to plan very carefully, but they felt they now had the time, technology, and know-how to compete with Sony. They can never fully compete with Sony because, like I said, they don't make their own hardware.
Sure.
But they could design the chip, they could patent the chip, and they could get it to shrink in price over time. Probably, in my opinion, the most interesting part of this whole story, Sony fucked up royally, and this cost them the whole generation, I think. So Microsoft...
You gotta talk shit on the cell.
They accidentally filled their new PS3 with cement when they sent it out.
I'm gonna talk shit on the cell.
That's why it was so heavy.
Microsoft had these former web TV guys designing the chip, but they were designing it in conjunction with some partners, being ATI for graphics and IBM for processor.
IBM, those traitors bastards. Weren't they doing the cell too? Isn't that what that was?
Were they?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
So Chris hit the nail on the head.
Sold them out.
So these were both new since Intel wasn't willing to work with anybody anymore because they're a bunch of bastards. And NVIDIA dropped out because they didn't want to be a part of something that was a loss, so they decided to get their money, so they were jacking up the price of working on the 360.
Their future's set, so...
Yeah. This is interesting, since IBM was also a partner on Sony's new cell processor.
Double agents.
But here's the thing. Here's Sony's huge fuck-up. IBM designed one microprocessor core inside of the cell. And this was a variation of their Power PC line, which Macs used a lot. But Sony did not put it in the contract that Sony owned the rights to the whole cell processor.
Whoops.
So IBM owned the rights to this microprocessor core, and they retained the right to use it for their own purposes. One of those purposes being licensing it to Microsoft. So
the whole reason they even used IBM, it was to make this thing, and they ended up,
So Microsoft lucked out. Since they were 2 years behind Sony in designing this chip, but they were luckily able to piggyback on all that 2 years of work.
When does the threat start?
Sony tried to patent the technology of the cell processor, but
Too late.
IBM threatened to sue them, saying, you can't patent stuff that was made by IBM engineers.
That you don't make.
Yeah. So those specific IBM engineers were then added to the patent for Sony's cell processor.
Oh, that worked out.
Because they had the names on the patent, then they were able to license this out.
Right.
Yeah,
because...
Yeah, and when things were all said and done, one IBM engineer in particular, who I don't have his name, but he had his name on the patent for both the processor for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360.
What a boss.
Yeah.
He knew it was up.
And here's another Sony fuck up. We're doing the Sony fuck up hour right now.
Yeah, later.
Sony.
We all know that they'll be fine in the end. So
IBM heavily recommended that this cell processor contains 6 cores. because an 8-core processor at the time was a little unheard of. Now we have 12-core, 16-core processors, but at the time that was a little unheard of. But they said, yeah, you should make that thing 6 cores. And Sony's decided, no, we're going to go with 8 cores because the CEO...
fuck you, that's why.
No, the CEO of Sony was quoted as saying, 8 is a beautiful number. That's the whole reason.
Okay.
Fuck.
Yeah, 6 is the devil's number.
And because
Oh, you mean the good guy in Christianity? Anyway.
Hail Satan.
because of this, the chip was more power efficient. That's why the PS3s didn't overheat as much as some other competitors that we'll get to. But it also cost a buttload of money to make and was impossible to program for at the time.
Oh man, reading excerpts from developers like years later was a riot.
Yeah.
Except for Naughty Dog, I guess, because they're wizards or whatever. But everybody else had a tough time.
Yeah. Microsoft chip, on the other hand, was a 4-core processor. And it contained 3 of these microprocessor cores that they were licensing from IBM.
Yo, that's less than 8.
And then a graphics core. And that meant that they could make this thing a hell of a lot cheaper and a hell of a lot less complicated.
Yeah.
Now, at the time, developers were not really into multi-core programming because multi-core processors were kind of a new thing. So they had to adapt to that on both fronts, but they could still use this thing the way that they used the old processors as opposed to having to learn a whole new architecture for the PlayStation 3. And the Xbox team, like I said, their number one goal was break even on this thing. Do not make the Xbox cost more to make than it is to sell.
Yeah.
So they decided, rather than being like, here's theoretical power that we can show you this demo of a giant enemy crab walking, we're just going to focus on making all of the power usable, and then we don't have to really show demos. We'll just let the developers make the demos for us.
I mean, technically the PS3 was more powerful, but still. Like,
that's what I said.
Yeah.
The PS3 was more powerful, but it was also impossible to program for.
Yeah, exactly.
So
most PS3 games ran worse anyway.
Yeah, Microsoft made it so that the developers could get the most out of that power rather than having to learn how to. Like, games like, I don't know if you could get a game like Uncharted to run on an Xbox, but Naughty Dog had to put a lot of work into learning how to do that. And they weren't making the game for both platforms, so they didn't have to worry about making it run on an Xbox.
It's funny, though, like if you look at launch games on the 360 compared to the very end of that console's run, they were like night and day. So like people figured it out even more. Like, it's hard to believe they were on the same platform.
PlayStation 3 is also easier to kill a child with. That's another plus for the PlayStation.
As was the original Xbox.
Yeah, exactly.
They have that in common.
Yeah. Also, Sony had a lot of issues making their own graphics chip because making a graphics chip work with the cell processor was really hard. So they ended up having to hire NVIDIA to do all the work for them, which ended up being more expensive, just like it was in the original Xbox.
$599.
Yeah. And also a little side note here, this isn't really related to games, but Apple, biggest company in the world right now. So Apple was...
This was fascinating to me. Yeah.
Apple was using IBM processors because of how much they didn't like Intel for working with Microsoft. And Apple wasn't as big a company in the early 2000s like as they are now. And the reason that they gained a lot of prominence was because they switched from using IBM processors in their Macs and MacBooks to Intel processors. And the reason they did that was because they were so pissed at IBM for helping Microsoft make the 360.
Jeez.
I love how much pettiness
I know, exactly.
Like,
they weren't even involved in the console.
All these stories of these consoles is just petty, like billionaires being real petty. And it's like Apple's the biggest company in the world right now because they're spiteful. So Microsoft, this was still the early days. They were designing the chip, but nothing was set in stone, because most of their team was working on Xbox Live. So we're going to go back to that for a little bit. Microsoft at CES, which is in January of 2002, then announced that their service would be called Xbox Live.
It's a good-ass name.
It is. It's a very good name.
Fucking classic, for sure.
Is this where the phrase is this where gamer tag was born as well?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
That might have been at E3.
Yeah?
I don't know.
Okay. That's a good name, too, I think.
It is. It is.
Otherwise, we'd still be calling them handles.
Handles, yeah.
Like movie hackers.
So, yeah, they hired a lot of programmers. They got this thing working. They tested it out, like Randy said, on a lot of not Madden. I'll get to that in a bit. But NFL
NFL
Fever.
That's 2000.
Which we know that series panned out.
Yeah, along
Well-
with NCAA and
So the interesting thing about NFL Fever, the reason that happened was because Microsoft launched Xbox Live with a lot of success about a year after the original Xbox came out. We're looking at around fall 2002.
that's pretty good though.
And
Like,
at this point, Microsoft had sold about 4 million Xboxes. So they had a potential audience, if
Okay.
people had broadband, of about 4 million users, which
Yeah.
is pretty good.
yeah.
But
sure.
one company was not a fan. EA.
Whoa! You're telling me the company that founded the Online Pass didn't want to
EA
make people pay for online play?
EA did not like two things about Xbox Live. This is going to sound noble, but I'll get to how shitty they are in a minute.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I want to.
EA originally said, we don't like the idea of having our customers have to pay someone else to play our games. They can play them for free on PS2, which is like, I guess, good on you, EA.
Sure,
You want
yeah.
your games to be free. But the
Weird
real-
because now they're buddy with Xbox now.
Yeah.
Because PS2 said fuck
Yeah.
EA Access or
Yeah.
whatever, or PS4. Sorry.
The real reason that they didn't want this was because they didn't
course.
like people having to launch a service that could advertise other companies' games to go into their games. That's the
Man, that
real
is-
reason.
yeah. Man,
If
what a-
anybody was going to charge to play their games online, it was EA,
Origin.
damn it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. That's what you're saying is that their stance on that is continuing into today because like there's still EA games that don't come out on Steam and stuff.
Yeah.
like it's
Right, but this was a big argument. Microsoft tried to win EA
they're
over.
a big publisher
And they would eventually do it, which I'll get to. But if you wanted to play any of your sports games, your NHLs, your Maddens online, you had to get a PS2.
didn't.
Right up until the end.
Okay, because I think Burnout 3 went online on Xbox,
Yes.
but that was late.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So they eventually came around.
They eventually came
Yeah.
around, but they were sticking to their guns, and so
Yeah,
much
how
so that
noble of them.
so much so that it took them a while to even get them to throw support behind the Xbox 360.
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah. I know. I'm trying to think of like.
Madden game came out because it couldn't
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
But like it took a couple years for the other sports to come out.
It
like
did, yeah.
the FIFA games and NHL and
Which
NBA
is-
didn't launch with the
EA
360.
did the same thing with the Dreamcast as well. Like they weren't really behind them as
No.
much. They were
Yep.
all about Sony
Yep.
in that era.
But the reviews came in. There were a couple glitches with Xbox Live, but Microsoft's points were proven. They started out with a lot smoother online play. The service required one login, and then you could play any of your games, as opposed to having to log into each individual game.
Like now.
Yes.
yeah.
The term gamer tag was born.
Yeah.
And you had a single online handle that would be used for all games
How-
across a single service. You had a
When did you guys make your first gamer tag? Was it for Halo 2, Austin, or?
Halo 2, yeah.
Okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
probably around then.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
all
can't
right.
think of a
I
game I
was
played
curious.
online before that.
Yeah.
At least not like that way. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Also a single friends list across,
Fucking beautiful.
which
Yeah.
is, it's like, well, yeah. Does that, any of these things sound familiar
Yeah,
to you guys?
exactly.
Xbox was also very popular with their audience for updating Xbox. They added new features as they went. Features such as, a lot of these are 360 days, but cross-game parties, so you could play different games and still talk to your friends,
Fucking yeah.
which,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that was way before
It's
Discord and
it's,
stuff.
yeah, I was about to say. I was like, yeah, it was Discord before Discord. That was like my favorite
yeah,
thing from
absolutely.
that generation. It was fucking brilliant.
Player cards where you had bios and favorite
Yeah.
games, and most importantly, achievements.
Something that everybody would eventually go
Yes,
on and copy.
everybody
Yeah.
has achievements now, but
Yeah.
that was, and
Steam doesn't even have their own
Wow,
name for them.
yeah,
They're just
anyway.
called Steam achievements,
Yep.
right? Like Sony
Yeah.
at least tried to
But-
win trophies, but
but Xbox Live revolutionized the online games industry.
For fucking sure. Like
Yeah.
so many of those things are like just
Essential,
absolutely taken for
yeah.
granted. Like with no idea.
well, think
where
about
it came from or
literally
what it would be
every
like without
single
them.
online game now has parties, as
Yeah.
opposed to when it was just like a
Right.
list of servers.
It's
that
like-
were on PC before.
It's like all of these things. It's like you joke about having a single login. Now you have to log into every game again because every game has its own launcher.
now, yeah.
But the reason every game has its own launcher is
More
because of the
passwords.
success of Xbox.
Everybody
and
wanted a
Xbox
piece.
Live. Everybody wants a piece of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, Xbox launched Xbox Live late 2002, and they did great work. A lot of people were very happy. But with that out of the way, it was time to put full force. All their programmers were now working on
Xenu,
Xenon.
Xerox.
That's trademarked.
Oh.
Yeah. So they did a lot of studying of this cell processor and all the components the PS3 would be made. And somebody in the company decided They estimated that PS3 would probably be ready to launch in about 2005.
Oh, they missed that. Oh, yeah.
Microsoft coined the term being dreamcasted.
Yo.
Microsoft didn't want to be
fucking God.
Microsoft didn't want to be dreamcasted, which is to have Sony announce a more powerful system after you do and dry up demand for your new console.
That's real on the
Yeah,
nose.
in case you didn't
Okay, here's where we'll get to a theft that I mentioned earlier. A big opportunity presented itself on the software front. Here's the thing. They had a couple companies, but the one company that they had a partnership that was real big for them was Bungie. And the thing was, Bungie's not about making games quickly. So the higher-ups wanted them to hound Bungie to get Halo 3 done in time for the launch, but Halo 2 came out in 2004.
Yeah.
So they're not going to make a Halo game in a year.
Yeah.
and we're glad they didn't. Obviously.
Because Halo 3 is phenomenal. But
yeah.
But they needed a company to get behind them for this launch. They needed a company that could bolster their lineup.
They went after my buddies.
Yes, and they found a small company in England by the name of Rare, who had been working with Nintendo for years.
Forever.
But
yeah,
Nintendo,
so long.
here's the thing I think a lot of people
Not forever,
don't know.
but a long time.
Nintendo was actually, Rare was not happy working with Nintendo anymore. I mentioned earlier that game budgets in the N64 days were probably about $2 million, and they were growing to about $20 million.
Yeah.
Rare kept pitching Nintendo on new games, and their budget projections were around $20 million.
Yeah.
And Nintendo kept coming back and saying, no, you used to make games for $2 million, make them for $2 million.
Yeah.
And Rare was like, we can't anymore.
Yeah, the scale's
Yeah,
getting
right?
bigger.
And because of this, Rare...
And they didn't. They
No,
couldn't
just
be
give
like,
them big heads. Oh, never mind. Or just make it look like way worse.
How did they were not just like motherfuckers? We made GoldenEye. Give us the money. We
Yeah.
can give you. We can deliver
Which is
another hit.
like everybody shits on Microsoft for taking Rare away from Nintendo. Nintendo did it to themselves. This is the point I want to
Absolutely.
make
Sure.
here.
Yeah.
And
Nintendo just wanted to keep making trash, right?
Yeah.
Whoa.
and Rare
just
managed to get the budget to make one game on GameCube, and it's phenomenal. Star Fox
Adventures. That was the last
like
thing with it.
Nintendo could have just gave them the fucking money, and like there'd be so many good Rare games. But like.
Yeah. Well, move over Star Fox Adventures because here comes Grab by the Ghoulies.
Yeah. But yeah.
It took them a little while to get their footing
Yeah.
with Microsoft, I
Also,
feel.
Microsoft wasn't the only bidder. Activision was also looking into purchasing Rare, which would have allowed them to keep making Nintendo games, but Activision would pay
I
the
didn't
budgets.
know this until, I saw this in here. And,
But Microsoft, being Microsoft, making $2 billion a quarter, outbid Activision and bought Rare on September 24th, 2002 for $375 million.
Deal.
Well, not really.
Well, that was at Rare's like height too. Like
Yeah. But, you know.
they came back with some shit.
Yeah, I mean, they made Viva Pinata.
I was about to say, I was like, Chelsea would kill me if I didn't mention Viva Pinata.
Yeah.
So
That game's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is where a lot of decisions were starting to be made. This is where we get to the whole... I had a section like this last time where they're like, we're going to include the broadband port no matter what. We're going to include the hard drive no matter what. This is my section for all those decisions here.
by the way, one last thing about Rare, that when they got bought by Microsoft, did they were officially under them, but they were still making portable stuff with Nintendo.
Yes,
I don't know how that contract
one of
worked,
their
but maybe
one of
mobile
their
licensing is-
stipulations in the contract for the purchase was that they were allowed to keep making portable games for other people as long as Microsoft did not have a portable platform.
They never tried
and
that,
at that time, nobody else had a
So
probably
they were still allowed to make-
portable platform
Exactly,
other than
yeah.
They were
Nintendo,
still allowed to
you
make
know?
DS games, even though they were owned by Microsoft. at the
Okay,
time.
yeah.
Good, that's a smart move on Nintendo.
That is smart. Yeah, well, smart move on Rare's part too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
That
Because
contract
like,
be
hey, we
dominant,
know
right?
you're the only ones that got it.
yeah.
So here's the decision time. It was decided that the system would support play on these newfangled HD TVs everybody seemed to be getting so
That
excited
Dead Rising
about.
font was real hard to read if you didn't have the HD TV.
And here's probably their only mess up in designing. Well, their second biggest mess up in designing the Xbox
on
360.
the HD DVD.
No, not that one.
Okay.
Due to the cost of the hard drive in the Xbox, which a lot of people in
the hard
Microsoft
drive.
decided to pin the whole "it costs too much to make" thing on the hard drive, because hard drives did not really lower in price.
the 360 had memory cards when that first
360
came out as well.
was originally not going to have a hard drive at all, but developers talked them off the ledge and said, we need the hard drive, especially if you're going to make Xbox Live more prevalent.
Yeah.
And add a bunch of, we're going to add DLC to our games, people need hard drives.
Absolutely.
That thing was cool, man. You could pop it out.
I was about to say, yeah, and you
Yeah.
could swap it out. You could have multiple. I know I had a couple of
I used to
them.
bring it like to a friend's house or whatever. When
Yeah.
I'd just be like, let me just pop.
We
it in
literally
there.
had a Halo 3 hard drive. It was just,
Just
for our
all, like,
Halo 3.
Forge maps
Just
and
for
shit?
tons of Forge maps
That's
and
great.
everything we had. Yeah.
But so yeah, their compromise was, okay, we're going to have 2 SKUs.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
But that decision was actually made a little later. But yes, they were like, we're going to have 2 SKUs. One of them's going to have no hard drive, and you have to buy memory cards.
I bought that one. It's called the
Yeah,
Core.
the Core.
Yeah. They later
And I-
renamed it Arcade.
I
Right.
got the
Arcade,
one
yeah.
with the hard drive.
Oh,
Yeah.
smart. You thought ahead.
Yeah. Well,
They had different. The hard like I remember the hard drives were like plastic or whatever, but,
but
the metal.
yeah, that's the interesting
controller
thing
instances
is that
as well were
at the
different.
time it was like developers were a little mad at them because they were like, even if you put a hard drive in there, we have to develop for people that don't have them.
So we have to sell hard drives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like later on, it was so awesome to just have like a little thing that popped out and you could go buy a new hard drive
Totally.
and pop it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I remember I had the 20 gig and then I got the 60 gig and then I got the 120 gig
I was
and
about
then
to
I
say,
got the
well,
250 gig.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
I was going to say, what was the size of the first hard drive? That was
20.
20 gig?
20, yeah.
and yeah, that was, and Sony's was 20 and 60. It was 500 for the
yeah.
20 and
Did the smaller one was the smaller one backwards compatible, or only the larger one was, or something?
the larger one was. The
Yeah,
smaller
I
one was
remember
not.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They decided to
Space.
include a hard drive in at an extra cost to the consumer, not an extra cost to them. Which
Okay. Sure.
not a great move,
But
but
you
it
know,
worked out.
Yeah, it's fine.
And then we come to the decision of the DVD drive. Now it,
Oh, this
it was
is what I
announced.
was-
Yeah, it was announced that Sony would be using their brand new Blu-ray technology. At the time, a single layer could hold 25 gigabytes, and
What are
they
they up
knew
to now?
it's 50. That's
Okay. That's pretty good.
why you have to install Red Dead.
Yeah, I was at Red. Unless
That's
you're
why
Red
Red
Dead,
Dead's
it's
on
the
2 discs.
Only game that can't fit on that shit.
But yeah, they knew that that games were going to be getting bigger in size, and Sony did this move so that they could fit 25 gigabyte games on one disc.
There were a few 360 games that were like multiple discs.
Right.
Yeah.
So Microsoft had partnered with Toshiba, who was also partnered on the
Elena
cell
Noir.
processor. But
Yes.
they had a new technology coming out called HD DVDs, and this will come up later. But Microsoft decided not to use HD DVD technology
That was probably a good idea.
because they looked at it and said this won't be ready in time for 2005.
Oh, that was the reason?
Yes.
Okay.
So they decided to use a DVD drive and said if a developer wants to make a game that's 25 gigs, they'll just have to pop it on 3 discs like they did for like Mass Effect. and shit.
Yeah. And therefore, the HD DVD expansion was in production, or whatever that was.
And also, another important decision, a lot of people hated how big the original Xbox was and complained about it. It took up a lot of space.
We got our jokes
So
out of the way. It's okay.
Microsoft said, all right, we're going to make this next thing smaller. And part of making that next thing smaller was it can't have a power supply in the box itself.
Yeah.
So the decision was made to take the power supply out of the box and put it into a brick.
Yep.
That
They did that
would-
with the original
a-
Xbox One.
Yeah,
as well,
a big, ugly brick.
At least they
That would-
outgrew that.
Yeah.
As I stare at my Xbox Power Brick in the
Right
studio
now,
right now.
that brick, the only thing that sucked about the brick is that like you couldn't use any power cable ever. So if that thing failed or you lost it or anything, you'd have to buy that thing. It was
But
a small
advantage,
Xbox.
if your power
though.
goes out real quick, your Xbox will stay running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all these decisions were made by the end of 2002, but they were making decisions, but they still needed a strategy. They still needed a plan.
That's early on that they decided on all that stuff.
They were
They were not fucking around.
they
this
were
year.
not
Yeah.
fucking around this time. They needed
It's just
that
crazy
shit.
that their console is out and they're still innovating. Like they're just
Yeah.
that's just interesting to me. I
Yeah.
don't know.
So in February 2003, the executive team went on a retreat. Interesting side note that I don't have written down here. The retreat was in the same town that the opening to Twin Peaks was filmed in.
Okay, that's it. Is that Pacific Northwest?
Yeah.
Somewhere. Okay.
Up
I
near
assume.
Seattle,
Yeah.
Redmond, Washington is where Microsoft is. But they came up with something called the 330-300 plan,
Yeah, that rolls off.
which
the
is
tongue.
like marketing bullshit.
Yeah,
Fucking
absolutely.
synergy. But the strategy would basically be that the higher ups would come up with a 3-page memo of all the points that they wanted to hit with Xbox. That would then be followed up by a 30-page execution plan on how to meet all these goals. And then finally, a 300-page document written by the low guys would fill in all of the details that were left out of the 30-page execution plan.
What's the strategy?
Okay.
Lay it
Make
on
the
us.
poor
So
people do it.
Sum up these 300 pages.
So the 3-page memo
Oh, okay.
hit the following points. The new Xbox had to launch in 2005.
Okay, got that.
They could
Check.
not let Sony beat them to market, okay? The chips in the box would need to be owned by Microsoft, so no other company could be charging them out the ass to make changes.
All right, they did that too. So, yeah, okay.
The hardware needed to
2 for
break
2.
even on launch,
Sure.
cost-wise. They couldn't be selling this thing at a loss. In the Xbox days, they owned 20% share of the market. They wanted to up that share to at least 40%.
I feel like they probably they got that as well. Yeah, so that,
No, they didn't because of the
No?
Wii.
Oh, fuck you.
Because
Wii.
the Wii took a lot of market share from
Okay,
them.
sure,
'cause
sure.
People needed to
Nobody
play their
accounted
Wii
for that.
sports.
Yeah.
The Xbox brand needed to be profitable by 2007 before they would start working on a successor.
Okay. I
So-
feel like, yeah.
If this Xbox was a failure, then they were out. But
Wow.
this Xbox brand
This is the make or
needed
break
to be
console
profitable
right
by
here.
2007 for them
Okay.
to start work on what would later be called the Xbox One.
Yeah.
Stupidly.
And if I wonder if any games came out around that 2007 area to help them make even more money.
2007 was kind of a dead year. If only they had like an Assassin's Creed or a Mass Effect or a Halo 3 to bolster. Oh, wait, those all came out in 2007.
Bioshock, Modern Warfare,
Yep. Rock Band.
Rock Band.
To help all of these goals also, the third pillar of the Xbox brand, Xbox Live, needed to be built into the system.
Also check. Yeah, I feel like they nailed their fucking like
but
their-
like they needed Xbox Live needed to be unavoidable.
right.
Which is kind of annoying for some people who didn't want to subscribe. But like when you
Maybe
start an
back then.
Xbox 360 up, they're like, you have a silver membership.
Silver membership,
and you
yeah.
have no
You can still
fucking-
buy DLC
yeah,
or whatever.
Yeah.
but-
You got like barely any permissions, but you're an Xbox Live member. Everybody is, so just pay for it,
Right,
asshole. Like
yeah.
it needed to
It
get
worked,
it needed
yeah.
to get in people's way till they subscribed.
I mean, it was smart
Which
because
worked.
you had to
Which
make
did
a
work, yeah.
profile that was like had online into consideration, even if you weren't paying for it.
exactly.
So,
Yes. Which they hit that probably better than any of the rest of this shit. Although
Yeah.
they did hit 2005, but we'll get there.
Almost.
Almost. This is when they started to meet with developers to find some partners to help bolster this lineup. But a lot of developers were really upset about the hard drive thing. This is actually where the two SKU
This is where they
system
split that thing into-
was
okay.
devised. Because originally they were like, we're not going to have a hard drive this time. We're going to use memory cards. The developers like, you can't fucking do that.
I still have some of these
Yeah.
memory cards somewhere.
And so
They don't even have
the
ports for that
compromise was
anymore.
made that they would have a removable hard drive.
128 megabytes.
Yeah. But I actually mentioned this in our Epic episode, but one such developer was Tim Sweeney of Epic Games fame, and he was very upset about the hard drive
Oh,
thing.
this is the RAM thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he lost that battle. He was the one that was quoted as saying, like, when they were like, well, we're going to include it, the people have to pay for it. He's like, no, because then we
yeah.
still have to develop to people who don't have a hard
Right,
drive.
yeah.
He was the one that was like came out
Go Tim
publicly and
Sweeney.
said that.
Yeah.
But he was also upset about another thing, which was that the Xbox at the time had 256 megabytes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he showed Microsoft a demo of Gears of War
And that changed their minds.
running at 256 megabytes and 512 megabytes. And Microsoft made a then $1 billion commitment to include an extra 256 megabytes in the box.
I love that it took that one game
Yeah.
to be like, all right.
Yeah,
like,
but
yeah.
dude, I mean, imagine seeing that. I'm sure
the
it was
footage out
night
there
and
has to
fucking
be. Of,
day,
yeah,
dude.
I bet. Yeah.
The story I didn't include in my script, but I'm going to mention a little bit, kind of to hop on the whole fuck Cliffy B train.
Sure.
There's a whole anecdote.
Get on it.
There's a whole anecdote in that VentureBeat article about like Cliffy B was like pestering Microsoft. He's like, "Yo, you guys need another Halo? I got some shit to show you." I'm like, he's an asshole. But
What
Gears
was-
of War's a dope game.
What
so.
was the other one called? If the one without the hard drive was called the Core, what was the?
I don't remember.
I don't
Yeah.
know if it had a different name.
I feel like it did. It had a different box. I feel like they would have put like complete edition or like badass version or something.
It had a name.
Is that it?
Yes.
The Xbox 360
Premium.
Premium.
Xbox
Yes,
360
that was
Premium.
it. Premium.
They got
That come
the
with any
core,
games?
the Premium, then the Elite. than the arcade.
Yes, Elite Arcade. Arcade was the core later on.
Yes. Yeah. It went from core and premium to Elite and arcade.
Elite was the black one that had the bigger hard drive and stuff in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, fucking
So Microsoft had done a pretty good job of courting gamers. The problem that they thought they found was that
Who's next?
they needed to widen their audience more. At the time, there weren't enough gamers to sell as many Xbox 360s as they wanted to, or Xenons as they wanted to.
Yeah.
So they had another little meeting and they came up with a list of things that could be included in the Xbox in order to gain a wider audience. Specifically,
This has to be the most brilliant meeting ever, really. Like,
specifically, though,
For sure, let's create more gamers.
Jay Allard of Xbox fame got everybody in a room and said, I want to be on the cover of Time magazine. Write me a list of things that will get the new Xbox on the cover of Time magazine.
Man. So that's where multimedia...
This is where a lot of the multimedia stuff came
Ahoy
in.
Netflix.
Yeah.
Which kind of super insane at the time because I believe that this was like... That was the first time that service and services like that were even featured digitally at all. Like, I think Netflix, up until that point, was exclusively done through the mail stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's wild. To think
That is
about.
fucking wild.
Like now you go into your Xbox or your PlayStation or whatever, and it's just you've got Twitch and YouTube and Hulu and HBO Go and Amazon Prime and.
But more importantly, the multimedia stuff was kind of a no-brainer. Music players, DVD players, streaming services. But the one interesting thing came out of this was one guy pitched being able to play original Xbox games on this thing. And everybody at the company said, that's a stupid idea. We're not looking backward, we're looking forward. And he says, no, but there are X many people still playing Halo
Xbox
2
games, yeah.
Like, what if we got them and be like, yo, you can buy this new Xbox and still play Halo 2?
Yeah. George Bush is about to be president for 4 more years. These people are going to want nostalgia.
Yeah.
They later downplayed a lot of that stuff, but then
They did.
They brought it back again with the one like last year.
They had to go to IBM at the last minute to make modifications to make backwards compatibility possible. But
did
IBM
both versions
did it.
play? Like, was every game compatible? Both versions did it? Okay.
Unlike because this was emulation.
Oh, okay. That's
Xbox
different
360s was emulation. PS3s, the reason that the 60 gig one played PS2 games and the 20 gig one didn't was because there was a mini PS2 inside the chip.
Inside of it?
Okay.
Like a
which
chip
is wild.
inside the board. Yeah.
This is more in line with what the Wii did for GameCube stuff.
Yeah.
No, we did the same thing as PlayStation.
Oh, really?
There was a mini GameCube chip inside. Microsoft was
I
the
guess
only
I
one
made
that
the joke earlier about it being kind of the same architecture.
Microsoft was the only one that did emulation.
Okay. That's interesting. Got to play that Stubbs to Zombie somehow.
This idea was also where the name came from. So we're no longer Project Xenon or Morpheus or no, not Morpheus Trinity or
Neo.
Like they're turning around, like doing a 360.
Xbox 2 was the original name that they were going to go with, but that was thrown out because they didn't want to seem inferior to the PlayStation 3.
Sure. And then naming conventions were fucked forever.
Yeah.
They needed to have a bigger number than 3. Somebody was told to come up with a number that was bigger than 3 that made sense, and somebody in the marketing team decided to market
add 357 to that.
What if it just came out and it was called the Xbox 4? Like, just like, it didn't even make sense, but they're like, yo, that's one more than 3.
Somebody on the market team decided to market the whole idea of putting the gamer in the middle of a 360-degree circle of entertainment, and thus the name Xbox 360 was born and stuck.
Oh my God.
That's not that far off from when they named the One, because like it's the all-in-one. You only need one device for your living room.
I thought I read something that it was
Xbox
like
One.
how everybody called it the 360. Nobody ever called it the Xbox 360. So they were thinking like if we call it the Xbox One, people might call it the One. Instead, everybody calls it the Xbone.
Xbone. They've leaned into that now. There's nothing they can do to get away from it.
And like I mentioned earlier, Microsoft also received a whole lot of complaints about the design of the original Xbox.
Do you mean like visually or?
Visually, it was too big.
Sure.
I thought it was cool looking
It's
visually.
kinda
It was a
cool
little,
looking.
It's got
it was
the
a little
green.
too big, but
it is big.
But they decided to go outside of Microsoft for this because Microsoft was really good at industrial design, but they weren't really good at the sleek Apple industrial design. So they weren't
hip with the kids.
around the world to different design teams and had them pitch different looking Xbox. And the winning pitch was a team in San Francisco known as Astro Studios, who I'd never heard of before, but
they were the ones that actually designed the 360.
Okay. The design centered around making the Xbox. This is a great anecdote I don't have written here, but it was designed around making the Xbox sleek and welcoming to make it fit in entertainment centers. And their design was centered mainly around two things, which one of them I don't have written down, but the ring of light to fit with the whole 360 thing.
Right.
So the whole organizing the things. And the other thing was the reason it was curved inward like an hourglass was because the old Xbox looked bloated. This one had to look like it was breathing in fresh air.
Oh my
swear to
God.
God, that was their fucking
What
pitch.
a mouthful.
Yeah.
That last 360 that they put out though after the Xbox One was out was really badass looking.
Yeah, that was cool.
This one, the angled one, right? The
No.
hard angled
No,
one? No.
no.
No, they put out one that looked like an Xbox One.
Oh,
but it
after
was
the
like
Xbox One
small.
came out. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
That's
I do
cool,
know what
yeah.
you're talking about.
But yeah, their idea centered mainly around this ring of light to fit with the whole 360 theme. The quote from that VentureBeat article says, "One of the signature ideas was the ring of light, which was the on-off button for the Xbox 360. It had 4 glowing green sections, each of them divided into quadrants around the ring that told gamer which controllers were connected and operational. Later on, however, these rings would come to mean something else."
By the way, mini rant here, by the way, but I wish the fucking Xbox One and the new controller still had that, because you could never tell
Which
what
controller is
is
which player.
tied to what goddamn profile, and it's so annoying. Like, with the original 360, you knew what controller
you were
was
2,
linked to
3,
what thing.
4, yeah.
Even if you had the console horizontally or vertically, it would adjust
Oh,
the
it
rings
would. Yeah,
accordingly.
yeah,
And now
yeah.
it's like Xbox One you can connect 8 controllers to the damn thing, and I was like, I don't know which one is tied to what, or if the battery's dying. Remember when the battery was dying and the old one
Yeah, it
would
would like
flicker
swing.
around?
Yeah, swing
Yeah,
around.
it was...
In order to not
knew
not
what
sell
was
this
up.
thing at a loss, though, Microsoft revealed that they were ready to go to $399, which was a push.
Still beating
because
Sony by $200.
They didn't know that at the time, though.
Oh, okay.
Sony didn't announce the price of the PlayStation 3 until after the 360 was out.
They must have been thrilled at that E3
Yeah.
when they came
Yeah.
out.
I know when they found it.
Yeah,
But
they-
they're like,
woo!
and I think wasn't $399 the premium one, and the core was like $350 or something like that.
Oh, maybe,
Sure,
yeah,
I
for
think.
360, you might be right.
But they were willing to go up to $399. They were
Still
willing
better
to
than
cost more than the
500,
original
600.
Xbox. So all of these decisions and all of these designs were then given the green light by both CEO Steve Ballmer and the board of Microsoft, headed by Bill Gates.
Who?
Bill Gates.
Not familiar.
Second richest man on earth.
Nope.
He was the guy that Kurt Schilling wanted to be as rich as.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
yeah.
But the launch lineup was the part Microsoft was most worried about at this point. They felt like they had done all this, designing it to be cheap to produce, designing
Sure,
a good
sure.
chip, all this stuff. They thought they had nailed that, but they needed to get a launch
games.
lineup. They need games.
Oh shit!
And they were
Not exactly the best launch titles, considering.
I know, but-
not bad. I mean, Condemned was rad. Call of Duty 2 was good at the time.
but like the higher ups were like, we got Halo, where can we go wrong? And then the
Oh, and then
people
Halo
were actually
were-
working were like, Halo 3 is not going to be
coming
ready in
out.
time.
Give us
So-
like 2 more years.
Yeah.
So then they got the people at Epic on board to make Gears of War, but then guess what?
That
Gears of
wasn't
War
on-
wasn't
yeah.
going to be ready on time.
Hey, that King Kong demo blew my mind when I saw it running on a TV at GameStop back in the day.
But despite this, the move to buy Rare, as bad as you feel about some of the games that they launched with, Perfect Dark Zero, probably crushing Randy's heart.
Yeah,
They had included multiple games in the lineup
Fuck
from
that
Rare.
fucking
Rare had
game.
2 games. They had Cameo and Perfect Dark Zero.
Cameo's okay.
As well as a number of third-party titles, Condemned, like you mentioned, from Sega.
Yeah.
But more importantly, Call of Duty 2.
Yeah.
Despite the war that was going on between them to buy Rare, Activision managed to jump on board and get their previously PC-only series sequel onto consoles.
And there was like a watered down version of Call of Duty 2, Big Red one, that was the one on
Yeah.
PS2, GameCube, and the original Xbox, but they got the real Call of Duty.
But
2.
this was a
Yeah.
boon for both of them because Call of Duty blew up and people were buying Xboxes to play Call of Duty, which is why Call
yeah.
of Duty is as big a thing as it
Yeah,
is right
exactly.
now.
There's
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
way Activision could have missed out on that. Like,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
knew.
I played that demo at GameStop too.
I have a weird Call of Duty memory. We used to go to Best Buy when Best Buy used to have computer displays.
Yeah.
They used to have
man.
like a circle
Yeah,
of computers.
I remember that.
Like we used to get like 8 of our friends and go there, take it over, and play Battlefront and Call of Duty like for hours until they kicked us out.
You gonna buy anything?
No, we're not. We're just playing Call of Duty.
Hey, Activision, they had ports of Tony Hawk and Gun as well. They were ready for launch.
So this launch lineup thing they were worried about, but Microsoft would come to learn in time that they didn't really have as much to worry about as they thought.
No, in 06 they were ready. That's where you had Oblivion and Saints Row, Dead Rising, Rainbow Six
Yeah.
Vegas.
Oh yeah, no, they had plenty of games coming out for this
Gears.
thing, but I will tell you why.
Okay. Lay it on
IBM
me.
announced that the chips for both the 360 and PS3 were done around September 2004, which was a year and some change before the Xbox 360 would come out, and 2 years and some change before the PlayStation 3 would come out. But here's the kicker. Microsoft's chip was based on existing technology. Like I said, it was similar to some processors that were found in Macs. And Sony's was not. Sony's was brand new technology, state of the art. And here's the thing. Game developers already have enough to worry about with having to learn an entirely new technology. So people had a head start with Xbox. By the time these chips were ready, people were already making games for Xbox because they were just making games for PowerPC chips, and then they would adjust accordingly. Whereas they had to wait to start games for the PS3 until this chip was out, because nobody knew what the cell fucking was.
Yeah.
It's the cell.
They just knew that it was power. It was
they
power.
knew it was going to be powerful and annoying. That's all they knew. But this issue, combined with the delays caused by using a Blu-ray drive, as I said earlier,
Right.
they knew that the HD DVD wouldn't be ready, but Sony was making Blu-ray, so they're like, it'll be ready. It wasn't ready. So
And Blu-rays were never heard from again.
this pushed the PS3's potential launch date out of 2005.
Oh, they must have been.
Which meant that at the time, Microsoft's only competitor would be Nintendo if they were ready.
And they didn't hit 05
And
either.
Microsoft was pretty confident that they could beat Nintendo because they already did it. Little did they know they wouldn't.
They
But
didn't unveil the fucking controller that year. They just showed the...
this was 2004.
Oh, it was 2004.
This was
okay.
before the PS3. This was before anything was
Right,
announced.
so they had nothing to worry about at this point.
But they knew.
They did, but they didn't know what it was. So
Yeah,
they
they knew that the PS3 would not make 2005. So, and Microsoft decided that they were gonna blow this thing out. They were gonna launch on the same day in multiple markets. It would come out at the same time in America and Europe and Japan, and that they were gonna
Wait,
have.
did the 360 have a worldwide launch?
It
like
did.
that? Wow. Okay.
And they
That's
decided
rare
that
for a
they were going to
console.
have 3 million Xboxes ready to sell on launch day, which was unheard of at the time, and meant that but their processor was done a year ahead of time, so they had plenty of time to manufacture. But here's the thing. IBM had great news for Microsoft. ATI, on the other hand,
No, not so much.
not so much. ATI had signed a contract early on in development that if they caused any delays, they would pay for it.
Oh shit!
So
That's
they
a bad
What a great thing to
so
get them
they
to sign.
so they had their ATI graphics chip ready in November of 2004, right in time for IBM's to also be ready. But after 6 weeks of testing, it proved that the chip was indeed not ready and would constantly crash dev kits. And the interesting thing here is that, when you're coding and like if you're making a game and it crashes, you recompile your code, which
Right.
takes a couple hours, a day maybe, and then you're able to test it again. Hardware, not so much.
Not the same.
You have to reiterate, you have to reprint the chip, you have to re-put it in the dev kit. So it took them, after multiple iterations, it took them until July 2005 to iron out all of the bugs in this ATI graphics chip.
That is close.
Still first to market, like a couple months later.
Yeah,
Well-
like 4 months.
Yeah.
So here's the thing.
They had to make those
Microsoft-
3 million consoles that they promised.
Microsoft thought that they were going to have a year to manufacture 3 million consoles, and they had started promising people that they were going to have 3 million consoles
What
ready.
deal with the devil did they have to sign?
But they couldn't start actually manufacturing the ATI graphics chip until September. So they had 2 months to make 3 million consoles, which is impossible.
Those little kids gotta
Yeah.
get.
Yeah. And they
get
also,
cracking.
in debugging this thing, they missed one major flaw that it had. A major flaw that would go on to, pun intended, be a red mark on the Xbox 360's history.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. But Microsoft chose not to announce at E3 2004 because they knew Sony wasn't going to either.
That showed that Halo 2 though.
And they didn't want to be Dreamcasted, so instead they focused everything on Halo 2.
Smart.
Yeah. But here's the thing. They knew Sony was going to announce at E3 2005. They knew Nintendo was going to.
Nintendo did as well, yeah.
Yeah.
I just
And
watched
so-
that conference.
So they partnered with MTV to announce their console live on national television.
What the fuck? That's so weird. Is
yeah.
that video out there? I
It
gotta
has to
find
be.
that.
It
Yeah,
has to
that's-
be.
That's great.
But yeah, they announced it on MTV, and everybody was super excited.
Sure.
And this
yeah.
was right around the height of. This was right before. I think it was in May of 2005, right before E3.
Yeah.
And they still had Halo fever going on, so a lot of people were very excited
Sure.
with
Yeah,
Xbox
yeah.
as a brand.
That's a big deal.
But here's the thing. Then Microsoft decided, okay, we're going to announce early, and then we're just going to show up to E3 in full force. They went to E3.
All those games.
They had dev kits ready
Yeah.
that weren't crashing. They were showing off multiple games from Rare, who was a big company. They were showing off Call of Duty 2.
Still angry about Perfect Dark Zero.
And they announced their launch date of November 22nd, 2005.
Yeah.
Because they knew that Sony would not
Make
be
it.
able to beat them.
No.
Nor
Nintendo.
But yeah, it was here that they would learn that Nintendo would also not beat them to market. Nintendo and Sony both announcing that they
Because they showed that console at E3 without a final name, without games, and without a controller. Like, it's crazy.
they announced that they would delay everything to 2006. And interestingly, Sony launched the PS3 in Japan in 2006 in like March, and then it
Wait,
didn't come out
really?
here until
Wow, I didn't know
I
that.
think so.
That's crazy.
They had
That
to
is
delay
very
it.
interesting.
They announced
Yeah.
it for spring, and then they had to delay it to fall. But I'm not sure that. I think it was just America that got delayed, but I'm not sure. But
Yeah, Europe as well. Right?
yeah, which left Microsoft alone in the 2005 holiday season, which was everything they could have
everybody got
dreamed
the
of.
fuck out the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, right?
Microsoft was now aiming to sell 10 million Xbox 360s before PS3 or Project Revolution could launch.
That's bold.
It's bold.
That's bold.
Yeah.
This was a very hopeful number.
Sure.
But they had they had generated a lot of excitement with that MTV thing and then E3.
There was buzz for sure.
So they thought they could hit it. But they needed to get some consoles out there.
Yeah.
This time they went with a different approach to launching the console. I talked on the Xbox episode last time about how they launched in Times Square.
Were there
right
any
after
tigers at this
9/11.
one? Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, they had all this shit.
The big spaceship.
Funny you mentioned that. So instead of launching in Times Square, they got an abandoned airplane hangar in the Mojave
Yeah.
Desert. And I want to know if
I've read about
do you
this.
remember this?
I do, yeah.
They held an event called Zero
Zero
Hour,
Hour,
and
yeah.
if you bought the Xbox at 0 Hour, you would get like themes,
Right,
achievements, and it
yeah,
would
that's-
say Xbox 0 Hour on
God.
the console.
Yeah.
It had like a special faceplate.
I heard there were many people within games like they talked about this down the road. It was great, and they tried to do something like it again with the one, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't know if that was the
Yeah.
to
Just
same
the day
scale.
one edition.
I
right?
have that achievement. That day
So,
one achievement or
so
whatever.
part of Microsoft's plan was to sell 3 million units by the end of 2005, which is why they went ahead 3 million made. And they were doing well. Call of Duty turned out to be a smash hit.
Oh yeah.
And other than a few supply issues and a few reports of overheating, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the console was doing pretty well. They did not hit their goal of 3 million, but that was only
But they were
because
sold out anyway.
that's only because they couldn't make
Yeah.
3 million
They
fast
couldn't
I
enough.
wasn't
Yeah.
able to get one until 2006.
They were sold the fuck out.
Yeah.
Which was both good and bad. They didn't hit their goal, but
Still, yeah. I remember though, like that thing, you couldn't get it for a while. That's
here's where it gets interesting.
yeah.
So
Tell me about
we get to the end of 2006.
Yeah.
The Xbox 360 continued to sell as fast as they could make them. But the more consoles they got out on the market, the more reports they received about overheating. And each port was coming in with the same description. The famed green ring that was supposed to denote a circle of entertainment glowing that glorious Xbox green was now only 3/4 of a circle and blinking an ominous red. And more importantly, the consoles would not turn on.
Nope.
And the community decided to give this an equally ominous name, the Red Ring of Death, which was a parody of the blue screen of death that Windows was famous for.
Yes.
And people were shocked. The more these reports came out, people were like, how did Microsoft mess this up? Everyone was shocked. Everyone except Microsoft. Because this was a known problem.
Ooh.
Microsoft, many engineers spoke up, told them to shut down production, to delay it to 2006, and Microsoft was like,
no, get them out there.
They have to be out before PlayStation. We have to be out for PlayStation.
They did try to fix,
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing. They wanted to be Sony to market so bad that they went ahead with production with this being a known issue.
Spike gets you a long way. Still.
Now here's where I'm going to get into. I don't know if a lot of people know why the Red Ring of Death happened. I'll get into that.
I was going to ask before you explain that to me. I'm just curious. Did this happen to both you guys at some point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I went through a couple different Xboxes. I even did the Tal trick.
It happened to my first one.
My Franken Xbox.
So we'll get to why the Tal trick works.
Okay, I'm curious.
So this issue was caused because the graphics chip that they did not have a lot of time to test with was pretty large.
Right.
And they mounted it to the board with basically a grid of tiny metal balls.
Huh.
But the problem was
there an adhesive that kept that?
No. It was welded.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then the heat inside the Xbox would get so great that the chip would expand.
Huh.
And these balls were not made to expand with it. So since they were rigid structures, when the graphics card expanded, it would cause a lot of stress on the balls, and eventually they would fracture.
And just come off of the board.
And then the graphics card would essentially become unglued. And similar to a PC, when you turn on your console, it has to do a check that it has every component it needs to boot, which is where the red ring error came from.
Okay.
Tal trick worked because if you were able to sit your Xbox down, lay it flat, not standing up, because the Tal trick did not work standing up.
It only works laying down.
You would essentially overheat your Xbox so much that it would re-weld those balls together. But it was temporary.
I wonder why that was only temporary.
It was temporary because eventually you would be overheating your Xbox so much that everything would expand and you would crack more of those balls. Which is the Tal trick would just make the whole problem worse.
It would work for a couple more months if you were out of warranty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oof. Here's the weird thing. I still have the Xbox 360 that I have in my house now is a launch one that a friend of ours had, or Chris that was on here, and that's still working.
Yeah. My second one pretty much lasted until I got an Xbox One.
Yeah.
They didn't all fail.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that every Xbox failed.
Not sure. It was,
but that's a rumor.
Yeah.
So by the time the PS3 and the Wii had launched in fall of 2006, sales numbers were looking very good for Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
They had met their 10 million consoles beating to market thing.
Okay.
They hit it.
All right.
But here's the thing. It's an estimated that 24% of those 10 million failed or would fail in time, which is about 12 times the average rate of 2%. Usually consumer electronics, you can't make 100% of them work.
Sure.
It's usually about 2% of them that fail,
Guess
which
who
is
was
why
in that 2% for Xbox One?
Yeah.
Also me.
Yeah. Which is why you have a warranty thing on all electronics, but yeah, they missed that by about 12 times, 24%, which is a quarter. Microsoft would end up shelling out about $1 billion to fix these Xboxes, to mail them to them, send them back.
But they hit that milestone.
And the problem got so bad that they actually had to shut down all production of the Xboxes in early 2007, right after the Wii and the PS3 came out, and figure out the issue.
Well, that was the thing. They made damn sure that issue specifically would not happen again.
Yes. And the issue was solved. And the failures became a lot less common. Some people out there were still reporting failures, but those were older models. The newer models were built in such a way that would never happen again.
Yeah.
And I think it was reported by 2009 that I think it was still 15 or 10% of consoles had still failed, but the number was shrinking. The more people bought the new models,
Yeah.
the number was shrinking. And if anybody's broke, they sent them a new model that would never break
Say what
again.
you will about the One, that thing don't overheat.
Yeah.
My PS4, I feel like that thing is gonna catch fire and fly away.
Yeah.
My Xbox gets hot sometimes.
Yeah.
Like
Does it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Like really, really
It's
hot.
great. Yeah, it's great.
old.
If you play Red Dead and put your feet on the shelf where it is, it's like a foot warmer.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
In summary, what have
the
we got here?
the issue was solved. Failures became less common, but at this point, damage to the brand had happened. But as we know now in hindsight, that damage was overshadowed by the massive success of the
Fucking A,
360.
yeah.
So,
worth it.
in summary, let's go over this again. Microsoft had reached its goal of selling 10 million 360s by the time the developers or the competitors hit the market, but the Red Ring of Death problem had hit them very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it made the lead not as fruitful as they had hoped.
Soured on the brand for some people. For
yeah,
sure.
but still,
Yeah.
those that had working Xbox 360s
Loved it.
Loved them.
Yep.
Oh, especially because
me
of that
being one of them?
year,
Me
the
too.
year after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next 2 years.
Still, those Xbox, the PS3 was big. It was bulky. It cost at least $500.
Yeah, 600 if you wanted the good
And it was
one.
impossible to program, meaning that games like Skyrim came out and barely worked on PS3.
God, yeah, that's the save bug shit was.
They
bad
had
on
bugs that they could not fix
Yeah.
because of the way PS3 was made.
Those,
Yeah.
those statements were just like, it's fucked.
Games
I
like
don't know.
BioShock came out and then they came out for PS3 and ran worse.
Yeah,
Like
I remember
you know,
that.
it just the Xbox was the better product for developers and for customers.
Yeah.
And
Everybody.
Xbox was able to continue outselling the PS3 when it
Yeah.
came out.
And,
they had-
and regardless of where you're gaming, you got to thank that platform.
yeah, they
PC.
were in the lead
Yeah.
out the gate, but they continued to outsell PS3 when
Oh,
it came
yeah.
out. The one thing that they couldn't look forward to and predict was that the Wii would come out of nowhere and sold like hotcakes.
Yeah.
But the thing
Like
is,
a tickle me Elmo.
yeah, the Wii was a toy that parents were buying so that they could play fucking tennis in their living room with their dumb shitty kids. And so like I don't know. Like Microsoft was now selling games like crazy for this
Tell me
thing.
Gears of War and the Halo franchise is worth more than Wii Bowling, and mean it. You can.
yeah.
It's you're right. I guess. I doubt that if the Wii didn't come out and Nintendo had just released another platform, that the Xbox 360 would have sold better. There was the people that bought the Wii didn't buy it instead of an Xbox.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
what I was saying.
yeah,
I
yeah.
still feel like the live service and the sales of games
Yeah.
and whatnot, the 360 still may have been more profitable. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Like, I mean, at least
No,
more
I
than
agree with
Sony.
you.
That's
I
for
because
sure.
doubt there was that.
Everybody that bought a Wii bought it for Wii Sports and then didn't
then
buy
never
any.
bought a game.
Yeah, and then never bought a
it's-
game.
Yeah.
My cousin bought it and then used it as a piggy bank. He put pennies in the slot.
It's about as good as playing a
I
game.
literally, for some reason, my Wii ran Netflix better than any other console.
You needed
like,
a fucking disc to run, like to play Netflix on the Wii. It was a nightmare.
No, it had
No,
a channel.
yeah.
Oh, it had a
channel, yeah.
disc first.
No,
I
yeah.
swear
So
to
did
God.
PS3.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, this was like after that. But I meant
Yeah, if
like,
you wanted
that's
to
what I
watch
used
it in 480p or whatever.
but still,
crap.
it worked forever. Like it would stream so well. Like it would never, for some reason,
You know
the
what
internet-
streams better? Literally anything else. Fucking
So I think it's important here to look at the bigger picture.
totally. I jumped the gun a little bit earlier when
Yeah.
I was talking about gaming and other shit, but
Yeah, it's hard to think of any features that modern consoles have nowadays that we can't at least somewhat attribute to the Xbox
or
as
PC.
a brand.
Yeah, or anywhere.
Or PC,
Mobile,
yeah. A
it's-
lot of people will shit on Xbox and say that their computer is better, but PC gaming in the early 2000s was not a thing until Microsoft decided to make drivers for the 360 controller.
totally
That changed everything.
Yeah. That's
Like,
what everybody on PC uses. Like,
Yeah. You know, you have to at least somewhat attribute it to Xbox, and more specifically, the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
Because by the time the Xbox One came out, everybody had already stolen everything the 360 did
Totally.
well, and the Xbox One was just the start of all this stuff. But, you know, the more open platforms led to bigger games, more games, indie games like Braid,
Totally. Yeah.
you know, Super Meat Boy,
Castle Crashers.
Castle
Castle
Crashers,
Crashers.
things like
Fucking
that.
A.
DLC became a thing. Parties became a
Ooh.
thing. Like we said, Discord is like the
Yeah.
successor to
We're
Xbox
saying everything,
Live.
voice chat, parties,
Voice chat, gamer tags, unified games
friends
list,
lists.
platforms that hold all your content, achievements.
Achievements,
Yeah.
yeah.
Microsoft may not have invented any of these things. But pull any gamer off the street, ask them where they first experienced things like achievements and parties, and I bet you Xbox will come up a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Microsoft had a lot of goals between Xbox Live, and Xbox 360. They accomplished some of those goals, some well better than others.
Even those terms like transcended beyond games, like,
and they
it's like-
spectacularly failed at other things they were trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
But I think that no matter where your allegiances lie in this never-ending console war or
Still
consoles versus
going
PC,
strong, yeah.
I think we can all agree that the video game industry is a better place as a whole because Bill Gates was really mad at some Japanese people.
Yeah, and that the 360 is still the best console ever made, after the GameCube, of course.
Wrong.
I'm
Lies.
gonna beat you to death with a GameCube. It's got a handle too, so it'll be easy.
But fucking A, I think that's our
That
that's gonna
wraps
do
it
that's
up.
gonna do it.
Fucking A, yeah.
And of course,
better than that.
the story of 360 only grows from there.
It does,
But
yeah.
I think I wanted to cover more of the stuff that people didn't know.
Totally.
Everybody knows the Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2 blowing Xbox Live up.
I do
and-
want to do
Yeah.
the final chapter of this,
Yes.
though. Like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have
But-
to go back and wrap up all the cool things about Xbox
Mm-hmm.
and Xbox Live.
But I think that's it for today, everybody.
Yeah, we done, guys?
Yeah.
Yep.
Fucking A, good
close
job.
this
That was a fucking
laptop
great
right
story.
here.
I
Yeah.
feel like I didn't make as many jokes because I was literally just
Yeah,
sitting
you're
here
just like
learning.
yeah, I when I was like reading over the stuff in the outline earlier today, I was just like, I felt like I was just like, oh, like I was just like studying rather than.
Yeah. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, thank you again, obviously, for doing all of that research and compiling all that information.
Whoop,
That
whoop.
stuff
Fucking A,
is-
that was a
stuff
good
is
job.
fucking awesome.
All right.
But
That's it.
this has been Hot Button.
Thank you.
Yeah. You wanna toss up some plugs there?
Yeah,
Cowboy?
thanks for everybody listening so
Yeah.
far. It's been awesome.
Oh yeah, no, it's
I'm
been
not
amazing.
sure.
the
We
responses that
obviously
we've
our
got.
timeline is weird because of we're
Shout
time
out to some other
travelers.
countries.
But yeah, but thanks for downloading. It's awesome. You can listen to us anywhere. If you're already listening to the
find us
podcast, I don't
on,
need to fucking tell you.
Subscribe
where
on
to listen to.
iTunes, rate on
leave
iTunes.
a review, all that
Yeah.
other shit. Also,
Say follow us on Facebook.
no, yeah, for sure.
No,
But-
follow us on Facebook. Fuck them.
No, yeah, like us. Our Twitter gamer tag
Tweet us at
is
Spotify.
Hot Button Cast.
Yes.
And our Facebook gamer tag is Hot Button Cast, and Instagram is the same
Go
thing.
to our personals.
Yeah. My Twitter gamer tag is Chris I something,
I'm Restart Randy.
Austin Blakesley.
Yeah.
and this is the signing out, boys.